everybody to Vox. I don't know, I can't see anybody online, but
we got the salt and someone I don't know. Sojin?
well, welcome
Welcome, Sojin.
Welcome to Vox. I'm going to be your MC today, and yeah, let's kick it off. Good, Bob. Just to kind of remind everybody of our church values. One, church exists to love and serve the world, not to sit in judgment of it. And in light of what we kind of heard weeks ago, that's what a lot of people who are not in the church think of Christians, that we are different. So important to kind of fight against that. Church should be the safest place to talk about anything. And I just remind everybody that to be a safe place to one another so we can share our hearts. And the church should capture the hearts and the minds of the next generation. You're gonna have to talk. All right. We read the same set of scripture 3 times in a row. Luke 16. Luke is near and dear to our hearts. We spent a year going through that. And is it Joanna or Jonathan? Or who is it? I assume that.
This is Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan. Oh yeah, Hebrew Bible. That's right.
So Luke 16, verse 19 through 31. Once there was a rich man who used to dress in the most expensive clothing and spent his days in magnificent luxury. At his gate had laid a beggar named Eleazar, who was covered with sores. He would have been glad to eat the scraps that fell from the rich man's table, but instead, even the dogs would come and lick his sores. In time, the beggar died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In Sheol, where he was in torment, the rich man looked up and saw Abraham far away with Eleazar at his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, take pity on me and send Eleazar just to dip the tip of his finger in water to cool my tongue, because I'm in agony in this fire." However, Abraham said, "Son, remember that when you were alive, you had the good things while he got the bad. But now he gets his consolation here while you are the one in agony. Yet that isn't all. Between you and us, a deep rift has been established, so that those who would like to pass from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." He answered, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, where I have 5 brothers, to warn them so that they may be spared having to come to this place of torment too." But Abraham said, "They have Moshe and the prophets. They should listen to them." However, he said, "No, Father, they need more. If someone from the dead goes to them, they'll repent." But he replied, "If they won't listen to Moshe and the prophets, they won't be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
Thanks, John. Announcements? Oh, announcements. Okay, what's happening? Morning, everybody. Okay, happy birthday to our September Boxers. Oh, it's my birthday.
Hey!
Please add your birthday in that QR code or online. Men's and women's hangouts for September at the Hess home.
It will be October.
Yeah, October. Women, Thursday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. Please bring a snack to share just yourself. And then the men's meetup happened already, but there'll be another one in October. Nope, so we discussed these events. Oh,
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I gotta talk faster. So we discussed these events and binaries. Anyone is welcome, no matter how you identify.
Hurry up, John. We got to schedule you now.
By the way, the Hess house is enough free issue. So.
Except Randy.
All right. Upcoming Sundays, October 5th, we have Access Session Group in person only, no Zoom. We still need a host. October 12th, Matt Nicolados at the West House and on Zoom. And October 19th, Bonnie on all Zoom. And finally, October 26th, Tim Gombis will be back at the Olsons and on Zoom. Okay.
That actually would be on the Zoom, right?
Well, we'll still be here,
Oh, you'll be okay. So,
but Tim sadly will not be with us.
No.
We'll be
With
meeting
us,
here,
but
but Tim will be
you
on.
Yeah, candy cone.
You will not be there, so we are.
Aw. Join us for the next Vox planning meeting. That's Wednesday, October 29th at 7 PM on Zoom. And then it's voxoc.com and click virtual, then enter the password. All are welcome. Come with your ideas, suggestions, and feedback. And all is looking for volunteers, of course.
All right, we're gonna read Luke 16 again. First Nations, that would be Joanne. No?
That would be me, yes.
I was
And
gonna say, if I was a baby sister.
so First Nations is an indigenous translation of the New Testament. And I just love it because hearing all these various translations across the board, it's really, I think, provided additional insight. And I love the fact that we read the same scripture in 3 different translations. That's helped to gain a deeper and broader understanding. So Luke 16, 19 through 31. There was once a man with many possessions who always dressed in the best clothes, had more than enough to eat, and lived a life of ease. Every day a beggar named Creator Helps Him, who is Lazarus, was laid at the gate of his lodge. Dogs would come and lick the sores that covered his body as he begged for crumbs from the rich man's table. When the time came for the beggar to cross over to the world of the dead, spirit messengers carried him into the welcoming arms of his ancestor, father of many nations, and that's Abraham. At the same time, the rich man also crossed over to death, and his body was buried. In the dark underworld of death, Hades, he was suffering and in pain. He looked up and saw his ancestor, father of many nations, far off in the distance. He could see Creator Helps Him, being comforted in his arms. He cried out in his pain, Father of many nations, my ancestor, have pity on me. Send Creator Helps Him to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my thirsty tongue. Help me, for I'm suffering in this flame. Father of many nations said to him, My son, do you not remember? All your days were filled with good things, but the days of Creator Helps Him were filled with sorrow and pain. It is now his time for comfort, but it is your time for sorrow and pain. Look, there is a great canyon between us, so wide that none can make the journey from here to there. The rich man hung his head and said, Please, my ancestor, send him back to the lodge of my father and my 5 brothers. He can warn them of this place of suffering and pain, so they will not have to come here also. Father of many nations said to him, They have the words of drawn from the water, who's Moses, and the words of the prophets. Let your family listen to them. No, the rich man cried out, if someone goes back to them from the world of the dead, they will turn their hearts back to Creator. Father of many nations shook his head and said, If your family will not listen to drawn from the water and the prophets, then they will not listen even to one who comes back to life from the dead.
Thanks, Joanna. I love hearing that translation. All right, we have our friend Tim Gombis, and as is protocol, we have to ask you a question. And I'm not going to ask you 2, but I am going to ask you 1, being a fellow lover of breakfast burritos and Mexican food in general. You know that you're on the search for the best. What was the worst experience you had? Yeah. Switch, change up. Maybe just thinking about the night. They're all dead.
I was just somewhere where I had one. It was just really good.
Oh,
I think I was traveling. I was in the airport,
no fair.
and it was just really, really below average.
Yeah, and probably pretty expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a genuine disappointment.
Yeah, that is.
Really brings me down.
Sorry, man. That's right, the land of.
Yeah, you can't count on
Plentiful
Minnesota for
produce.
really good food. All right, well, good to see you all again, as always. It doesn't seem like I'm a stranger or a visitor yet. So we're in Acts 16 and 17, and there's a lot of drama going on here. And in Acts 16 and 17, Paul and Silas are in, I guess they're on their second mission journey, right? Their second ministry trip. And this is Paul and Silas in some Gentile territory, so non-Jewish territory. Well, which is what most of their ministry takes place in, Paul's ministry. And but I think it's interesting also again to see what happens in places where there's like just no testimony about the faith. They're bringing it to like for the very first time. So all kinds of drama ensues. So there's a lot of interesting things here to talk about, and I just want to play my role well as a facilitator and find out from you, what did you find interesting? There's a whole lot in chapter 16 and then a whole lot in chapter 17. So let's start with chapter 16. What jumped out at you, or what stuck out to you from the text as Luke tells the story? Any interesting details? There's a bunch of interesting details.
I think it's the first time he used the word we.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty striking. I think there are 3 of these in Acts.
Yeah.
There are 3 we sections, and we just came across the first one. So obviously this is a place where Luke, somehow, Luke never says, he somehow joins Paul's traveling company, and he starts saying we. And then, so that starts in verse 10. After Paul's in the vision, we got ready to leave once from Macedonia. And I noticed in verse 20, it says they brought them for the magistrates, and he's not including us there. And then but that might be just Luke was not part of the ones that were grabbed by some people and brought before the authorities. But then in 17:1, when he keeps telling the story, it says when Paul and his companions had passed through Amphipolis. So it seems like Luke is there briefly as he's telling the story, or at least as Luke tells this, as he writes this account, his account of him being there is only brief. We don't know how long it actually was, like, historically. But yeah, that's certainly interesting. What else stuck out to you?
I thought it was interesting that there were a few places where Jesus didn't allow them to go to. And it was just like, didn't allow it. And then, okay, let's.
No explanation.
Yeah.
For what? I know, there's no
Why?
reason.
Yeah.
How?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions. First of all, it's the Holy Spirit in verse 6. Then, like Casey said, it's Jesus. It's the Spirit of Jesus. And then there's a not allowed. And then I thought the same thing. Like, what's the mechanism? Holder? Or like drawing lots? Or like, is it the kind of thing where it's like, all right, if I make this one, we go. If I don't, if I make this putt, no, I don't know.
I thought that it was some sort of maybe internal or external force. Yeah. Could have been internal. It just could have been. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, okay, so it could have been something.
Can you imagine you see these people like wandering and somebody just like jerk to a stop and
Yeah.
like keep trying
Like
to
a
move
mime,
and then
like a
like
mime.
just-
Yeah, there's
A
this
wall.
shield.
A force field?
Or ghost Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, the first thing I was thinking, just sort of processing that, was the prophet, what's that guy's name that came to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem down to Antioch? The prophet.
Yeah, yeah.
We just read this. Agabus.
Wow.
Was it?
Gosh.
Trivia.
I'm out, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
There will be a Acts trivia. So was there like a prop, or was it something like that when someone says, our traveling company, they say, look, I have a word from the Lord. All right, well, let's hear it. Or what also was interesting to me was in verse 10, after Paul had seen the vision is in verse 9. So during the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing begging him to go over to Macedonia and help us. And what is most interesting about this is what Luke says in the next verse. After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready to at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us. So it's like, even if there's some kind of message, they had to process it. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like a clear thing necessarily. It took like human deliberation, which I thought was just fascinating how they're all kind of processing this. So what's the mechanism of the prevention?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Or is part of it just that Luke's intention is to show that they're kind of waiting on God's direction in this, not just their own.
But they're not waiting, they're actively moving
Well, no,
around.
but like saying like if he had a vision to go somewhere and they did,
Right.
and then they, the Spirit told them, don't go here, that it's not their own desires they're following, but.
Trying to make sure it's not
Yeah,
just like
I don't
you
know.
had a random dream.
Yeah, or I think if anything, especially in light of what I think is happening in the second big chunk, it's just another sign that like this is being actively directed by Jesus.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
not like necessarily pointing to their devotional posture so much as it is like this is being directed. The whole like birth of the church and all that is being purposefully organized or orchestrated.
Right.
You know?
But you do also see other places. I'm looking back at 1536. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Hey, let's go back, visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word, and see how they're doing." A little bit of like, maybe this is a good idea. It doesn't seem like it was directed by Jesus or the Spirit. Like, let's do that.
Yep. There's a lot of human deliberation. Yeah, I think that sort of dichotomy, is it God or is it them, is not helpful. It's like we have that dichotomy, but like, it's not one that really Scripture invites us to contemplate.
Do you have any idea why Paul knew that it was a man of Macedonia? Like, do he wear a certain color or
Is
style
it
of
like an
clothing?
accent?
Or
Like a New
yeah,
Jersey
like
accent?
how do they know? How does he know that?
A t-shirt.
Flashing neon signs.
Yeah. I don't know. It's motives. There was a woman on one of the what they call now? Flight attendants. She was on the Southwest flight. She was talking about putting your bag in the overhead container. Or whatever. Maybe it was like that.
Yeah.
Come over to Macedonia. I don't know. I don't really know.
I can't read any of this anymore without thinking back to what you said a number of times ago, that, this all looks like it's happening one thing after the other. And this, you read through this could have been a couple months, that it was likely longer than that. And there's just like no clue to any of it.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying about the bit, like when Luke is with them, it may have been for an extended time, but it's only 8 verses or whatever, 10 verses.
Well, it's interesting too that they do say the 3 different ways that they're like being directed, or so it does seem to be 3 distinct things are happening to direct them that are probably different from each other. So they don't explain in more detail than that. But there's definitely 3 things, but what are they?
Well, it is weird, like from a modern perspective, you would think had Luke joined them, like there would have been way more detail, right? Because he was there, but it's just went from they to we and then back to they. Like there wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah, and then there's also the early on when they replaced Judas, there's casting of lots.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's all these like ancient ways of
Yeah,
deciding.
you
things.
mentioned that they could have even cast lots.
Yeah, they could. It's not known. Okay, so anything else from the beginning of chapter 16, like before we get to where they travel to Philippi?
I was a little
mean,
curious
bummer.
about Timothy's father being Greek.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All just taking, I know it doesn't say he's young here, but we think he was young. We don't know how young. Timothy. But he took him and circumcised him for the road. I just thought it was kind of interesting. If the father's around, his wife is practicing.
Yeah, his mother's Jewish. His father was a Greek, so may have not been a Jewish person.
He didn't seem to have a say so or it's not mentioned.
Who, Timothy?
Yeah. No, the father.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know if there's anything like to be made of like that past tense, or is he a grown person, sort of making his own decisions? But what Luke is wanting us to know is that this is a person who would have been regarded as Jewish, but he's not circumcised, and so like that would prove an offense to like wherever they go because people know him apparently.
Second Timothy, like Paul also says, like you inherit your faith from your grandmother and mother. Like he gives credit to not just Timothy's mom, but Timothy as well. So like there's a lot of line there, but that is interesting. When I was reading it, I never knew, like I had read this and linked with that, so I'm like, oh, the dad's Greek.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting.
Isn't it true culturally that the Jewish faith is considered, like if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. It's not, if your father is Jewish, doesn't matter. It comes through your mother's
It's
side.
kind of all over. There's a lot of debate about how that is how you're regarded as, how Jewish identity is passed down. And it's like, is it does it come through your mother or your father? There's all kinds of sources that sort of say one thing or another. It seems like Luke is assuming that it comes down through your mother's identity, even if like for whatever reason. Yeah, it's really hard to tell.
That would make sense combined with the way you just phrased it from
Yeah, but it's also it's important to keep in mind that like it's not necessarily Jewish faith. It's like a whole way of life.
Yes, yeah.
So it's like it's Jewish identity and it's everything. Which because that helps me understand like they knew he was uncircumcised. It's like it's not like you would have the evidence for that.
Right.
Like, would be a set of practices. Like you would if you were circumcised, you would behave in certain ways on Sabbath. You'd behave in certain ways with regard to like your diet. You know what I mean? But if you weren't circumcised, you wouldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like it all has to do with like your whole mode of life.
Isn't there a bit of irony to all this then? Because the message they were delivering was to the Gentiles, you don't need to do all those things. And now here they are saying, Timothy, it'd be a good idea for you to do that. He was just
It was the chapter before.
but now it seems like the Jews shouldn't need to do that either, right?
Yeah, so it's like, what's the principle behind all this? Because we're just coming out of this controversy.
yeah.
But it's like the principle is whatever your identity, be that identity. And so like Paul does not want to provide any offense. Well, coming out of chapter 15, the apostles and the elders don't want to offend Jews in any town. And so they're telling the Gentiles to be sensitive.
Jewish person, so if he becomes part of Paul's traveling company, he's a Jewish person that's not really honoring his Jewish identity. You know what I mean? But like he would never, at least I think, he would not allow, well, he does this in Galatians 1. He wouldn't allow a fully Gentile person to be pressured to be circumcised and become Jewish. But it's like, in the ancient world, but just like today, like today, we are offended at cultural appropriation.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what are you doing pretending to be a certain ethnicity when you're not, or you're sort of like dishonoring a certain cultural heritage by behaving certain ways. So, like Timothy would have given off vibes or given off the message that like he was not, didn't want to honor his Jewish heritage and did not care about offending Jews wherever they're going. They're trying to be winsome to Jews.
Works have been done, right? You're still
Sure. But it's like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, like how important it is that every person stay in their cultural and social situation that they were in when they were called. Like, were you free? Were you slave? Were you Jewish? Were you not Jewish? Because if you feel like you need to change cultural or social station to be in the faith, then you're indicating that God favors one or the other. But he's, you know what I mean? But he's Jewish and is not. He's going to give offense for no reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, what's any comments or questions about or observations about the incident or the incidents in Philippi? There's quite a bit going on here.
In general, to do with 16 and towards the end of 17 is just the prevalence of women in these two chapters. That we don't generally find it in the rest of the New Testament. That,
Yeah, or we don't generally notice.
right? We don't generally notice they got worked out, but Timothy's mother, they spoke to, and then you've got Lydia, and then the female slave, and then towards at the very end of 17, the woman named Damaris and a number of others that were. So yes, and then 17 for quite a few prominent women. So just a general observation.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and Lydia is also someone that's able to provide hospitality. Like she's like, what did she say?
Yeah.
So she invited us to her home.
Yeah.
Come and stay at my house.
So she must have been some kind of prominent or have means to be able to do that.
I also thought it was interesting with Lydia, like, I feel like in other parts of the just I've noticed, like, oh, they, like, some male comes to faith, and then the rest of the household follows and gets baptized. But Lydia gets baptized, so does her household. And it felt like very, Lydia is the leading drive in that household to do all that.
Yeah, she may have been a household head, which was not uncommon. Yeah, that's one of the dynamics that's mentioned in chapter 16 several times with this the jailer. You and your household, all the others in his house, all his household, he and his whole household, which is really, it's arresting in a modern context where we're so democratic. Do you want to do this or not? Well, you can do this, but I want to. Like, what does each individual want? It's like so ingrained in us. Whereas in the ancient world, it was like, whatever, if you belong to a household, you took on the identity wholly, totally, of whatever the household owner was. Like you had your identity based on who that person was. So it rubs us kind of odd. Did they choose? I think it's interesting when verse 12, from there we travel to Philippi, a Roman colony. It's interesting because everything has been happening in Roman colonies at this point, but he notes Philippi in a Roman colony. And then he notes in verse 21, there's that detail, by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans. So there's something about these episodes that happened in Philippi that's like, this is happening in a Roman context that Luke wants us to sort of foreground that, which is kind of interesting. And also the I don't know if I've seen this before, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just haven't seen it before, actually, which would not be shocking, but there's a couple of anti-Semitic notes here. Verse 13, on the Sabbath, we went outside the city gates to the river where we expected to find a place of prayer. This is the first instance I can remember, but again, let me know if I'm missing something. This is the first time I can remember him going to a town and there's a Jewish gathering outside the city. Like there's always a synagogue in the city.
Oh, interesting.
And then it's notable because the objection in verse 20, but they brought them before the magistrates and said, these men are Jews. Bring our city into an uproar. It's not that they're saying, they're not objecting to like something foreign or like other gods or whatever, but they're advocating customs and lawful for us Romans to accept their practice. So it's just, there's something objectionable about that, which I don't really know what to make of that necessarily, but it's maybe striking. Also, I just think these kind of things are cool when narrators are a little bit playful. In verse 14, Lydia was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart. And then in verse 26, the doors flew open. I just think it's interesting when that, like, those little details that narrators include. It's kind of cool. So anything striking about that the series of episodes in Philippi?
Oh, well, maybe tidbit, like because you just mentioned it, the prison doors flew open, everyone's chains and it just, I couldn't really find it necessarily, it just was reminding me like, wow, it feels like exactly the same language that we read many times in the Bible. Maybe Isaiah 61, but like when Jesus reads from the scroll, usually we're thinking of a metaphoric way, but here it's like, oh, these seem like the same words, but they're.
Oh, you mean like loosening, like
yeah,
like debts or all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, when there's a list of things.
Yeah.
It just seems
Yeah.
like that. Language.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, like bonds, like loosening
Yeah.
bonds and all that kind of stuff.
I kind of wondered, and I don't think I was right, but I began to wonder like, ooh, if I looked through all of Acts, would I find that Luke worked in all of this things, like did he
I wonder.
made the lame walk and the blind see? Like was there an instance of all those things that Jesus, I'm envisioning when they opened the scroll and then he said, this is fulfilled today in your presence.
Yeah.
Like, and I looked.
It's worth looking at that.
I
language.
looked on the way here, I couldn't find it. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking, what's the language? When you mentioned it, Joe, I'm thinking, I thought you were going to go to the Peter in jail. Was Peter by himself in jail? Was it Peter and John? In the earlier in Acts?
I don't know.
But in Peter out.
Yeah,
Spirit led
the
Peter
angel
out.
led Peter out.
And in Rome, the church is Peter and James, not Peter and John.
I'm just wondering, what's the language? Is there a loosening of chains, or is it just the chains fell off? What chapter is that?
Like 2 or 3.
Pretty early. It seemed like it was pretty early. Yeah.
Well, I was struck by the idea that they were jailed and confined from an earthly standpoint, but then the earthquake came along, which would be, in my eyes, an act of God, which releases them. So there's earthly confinement, and then there's spiritual confinement. That kind of spoke a lot to me when I read this. And, then they're flogged, but they're singing, right? So they're beaten and flogged, and then they're thrown in jail, and there they are singing. So there's this parallel between this earthly confinement or earthly pain versus a spiritual release that seems to be repeated in that section.
Yeah.
And even the jailer himself, who was going to kill himself, but then he gets released from that and converted.
Makes you wonder about the woman that started this. She was
Lydia?
actually saying good words. No, it was the woman that said,
The future teller,
these are
the slave.
these
Oh.
men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved, but she just kept saying it. Interrupting Paul. It was
I think you often see that where there's the demon, and the demon is always saying the truth. Where
call back to Jesus.
it's always calling out, like in the case with Jesus, that you are the Son of God, you are the, and Jesus, releases the demon from the person. But they're always saying exactly what's going on, where everybody else is kind of.
what she felt though, having said that under a demon and then being released and knowing what she said as a possessed person in heart. And all this. It's been really interesting.
Yes, there's a lot going on here, and I wonder if it's because one of the things that Luke is doing is tipping off that we should be reading this in some senses as something that happened specifically in a Roman setting. First, it's not only the earthquake is not only an act of God, but it's an act of God as the divine warrior. So like in Old Testament context, when God shows up as the divine warrior, like warring on behalf of his people, rescuing his people, it's often earthquakes. Or like, it's most often earthquakes. Like when God shows up, there's like a storm and the earth trembles and all this kind of stuff happens. That means that God is showing up to rescue on behalf of his people. And this happens specifically in a Roman context where, like you said, there's like utter confinement, and like God shows up as the warrior when his people are absolutely behind the eight ball. It's like their odds are completely stacked against them. There's no way out, and so God shows up to do battle for his people, and one of the signs is an earthquake. And this is in a Roman context, so it's like this is God versus the gods of Rome.
Paul plays the Roman card at the end.
Okay, and then there's that.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot going on here with Roman values, and first of all, you're right. When demonically inhabited people show up in the pages of like the Gospels and Acts, demons are like having special insight into the spiritual realm. Just I don't know that in reality, but just on the pages of the Gospels, they will tell the truth. But and so when she says these men are servants of the Most High God, like in the Bible, that is like in the whole Old Testament, whenever God is spoken of, when there are other gods in view, his specific title is the Most High God. So she's using the exact right title and speaking the truth, because they're here to announce the way of salvation. What's she saying? Oh, they're telling you the way to be saved. But in a Roman context, and across really Mediterranean cultures, she has the upper hand, because the demon just played like the ultimate trump card right there. Because if you can name, well, first of all, to sort of speak reality, speak the truth about what's really happening before anybody else can sort of name it, is to take control of the situation. This is why demons try to like blurt out the truth quickly to Jesus, because they want to put him on the defensive in the Gospels. That's what's happening, first of all, like in a Mediterranean setting period. But then also in a Roman context, it was very important for Romans. You remember how loaded with significance every social interaction was from the pages of Colossus of Pergamum. Like you could lose honor or gain honor depending on what happened in any kind of social interchange. Well, if you ever go to a new city and somebody names your business before you have a chance to kind of like cultivate relationships and roll out your agenda before somebody else sort of guesses it, they basically own you, and you've been shamed, like you've been called out. And so like what would happen next is like Paul and Silas would just leave. They can't do it, they can't maneuver, they can't develop any relationships with anybody. So Paul, he's being harassed in these ways by having these power moves made against him, and so he responds by casting out this demon, by a certain power of the demon, which gets them into all this economic or all this social trouble. And basically by doing that also he liberates her, brings peace to the situation. And it's funny because the specific charge against them is they're throwing the city into an uproar, which they're not. They're calming the situation. But they throw the situation into an uproar. So it's completely ironic. And then they get, flogged. It's severely flogged. Man, that was some. If you did have a low paid personal.
When they were stripped and beaten.
Yeah, stripped and beaten and severely flogged. That's a bad day.
Well, and then the jail thing, I think when it said that the jailer called for lights, I don't think, oh my gosh, in addition to everything else, it was probably
Yeah.
jet black down there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. First, jails in the ancient world are just pits. Like just dig a hole and just jam them in there. It's awful. I mean, that like jails today is great. But, so yeah, they're beaten and all of that, and exactly they're still sort of, they still have all this. They show great resilience and all of that. Then there's the earthquake. But then also, it's so interesting. The magistrates sent their officers to the jailer with the order to release those men, and the jailer's like, "Great, the magistrates have ordered that you and Silas be released. Now you can leave. Go in peace." Like, cue the music. You know, it's like this is just a happy ever after ending. And it's just so, it's crazy to read this. Like what Paul said to the officers, they beat us publicly without trial. And that it's so great. Again, to read this in a Mediterranean way. And now do they want to get rid of us quietly? No. He's like, it sounds like he's throwing a fit. You know, it's hard to read it in any other way. But what is Paul? Why is he objecting? Well, the way I read this, or I'll just submit this to your consideration. He and his team have been shamed, and they're in the wrong publicly.
Right.
And it's like, and he, yeah, and he's concerned for the gospel to have a hearing in this place, and he wants the public to know, he wants it publicly demonstrated. They're not there in a bad cause. They're not criminals. And I don't think that if his rights were trampled, I don't think he cares about that. But that's like, he can use that to get the gospel off. Do you know what I mean? So that for the future in Philippi, gospel people that are Christian will have a hearing. There won't be like the stench of shame or criminality attached to them, and he wants that to be the case.
Yeah, so you're talking about honor and shame. So this end of 37, 1637. No, let them come themselves and escort us out. So I want the mayor and the deputy mayor
and the flogger
to come in.
Totally. Escort us out.
Yeah.
To give us like an honorable departure.
In public.
Yeah. So that everyone in the town sees it and word is spread that this was a massive mistake. And it's not looking for retribution. Yeah. They're not looking for retribution. They just want to.
That would be the retribution. Because the ones that did them wrong would have to come turn around and say, by escorting them out, they would be admitting we were wrong.
We were wrong for sure. Yeah, but if a Roman magistrate, even in a far-flung place, ever mistreated a Roman citizen, they could send word to Rome, and it would be the consequences were awful. So Paul doesn't want that kind of retribution. He just wants to set the situation straight. Like, that's it. I don't want you to lose your job, but I just don't want anybody that's Christian to look bad going forward. So there's a lot going on here with this episode that in a Roman setting is really critical.
Is that why it's contrasted maybe a little bit with, again, what happened in Acts 5 with the apostles? They were in jail, and then the angel was like, "Get out of jail and let's go preach, in the street," kind of a thing with it. So, because I wondered, well, why didn't they do that this time? Why didn't they just run away and get out of there? But in light of what you're saying, that makes more sense.
Yeah, you were talking about earlier about the opening. That's 5:19. During the night, an angel of the Lord opened the doors of the jail.
Okay. But he doesn't use the language of loosening. Loosening of chains.
I love how things are just so understated too. So the next verse, they come out of the prison, they go back to Lydia's house. In what we were talking about, now they have some credibility going back to Lydia's house, meeting with the brothers and sisters, right? And then they left.
Yeah.
Then they left.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, that probably would have been like they encouraged them. They probably were able to tell them, hey, things have been set straight here, so you don't have to live in fear.
Right. Yeah. And then.
Yeah, that's it.
But the island was restored.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Lydia could have had a lot of news, right?
associating with.
Yeah.
You got 12:7 is where Peter says, suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared and light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, quick get up. And then it says the chains fell off his wrists.
Okay.
So, that was the one where just the angel took it.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I just was wondering about the language about the chains.
That was a stealth mission though, no earthquake.
Yeah, they just fell off.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me even more about this whole scenario that I couldn't wrap my head around why this was, or why it led to this result. When the jailer saw that they hadn't left, he just immediately was like overcome and like wanted to be saved. Like, what was it about? I guess obviously he would have expected them to leave, right? Was it the fact that they didn't that showed that maybe there was the way they lived their life was like an honor to God? That I don't. Did anyone?
He would have failed in his duty as a jailer.
Well, I get that
He would
part.
have been shamed, and you probably have to.
He'd be put to death.
Sure.
Right.
So I would have expected, oh, thank you,
Yeah.
but he just went straight to like, what was the line? Sirs, what must I do to be saved?
Right.
For me, it felt like it had to do with the hymns. They were
I was thinking singing the hymns in there.
There's something different about these folks.
Yeah,
Right.
I want that.
Yeah, where most people probably would have, oh, great, I'm out of here. They showed their honor and their, hey, these are the kind of guys who are, following the God that
There's
they
something
serve.
to what they were doing.
Right.
And there's something good here.
Yeah.
Paul was shown grace.
I mean, that-
Sit there and tell him, don't harm yourself.
Mhm.
He might have known that that would be where he'd go.
Yeah.
I was thinking about his little story arc too, like he went through an earthquake, and I know how frightening that can be. And then he thought his life was over, like so whatever that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's rescued, like it's almost, it's just what a night he had, there's just a lot of emotion in there.
Yeah, right.
If you consider what his experience was, and it's like.
Yeah, this is an earthquake in the ancient world where like earthquakes would level towns. This is in the modern world, where the modern West was good construction. Probably.
Yeah, the construction standards were nuts.
But everything would collapse in these ancient cities. So it was like terror, these are acts of terror. It says he felt trembling.
So what Casey was saying is, I wonder who else was in the jail, because, Paul shouted, don't harm yourself, we are all here.
Yeah.
So were they just in Paul's, companions that were in jail, or were there some other folks that were in jail for other things, that they probably would take off?
Mm-hmm.
It's not there at all, but I imagine that this earthquake happens and the first thing they're doing is they're trying to take care of anybody that got injured or whatever. They're not leaving.
I don't think so. Not in the
That's
ancient
my
world.
imagination.
I don't think so in ancient world. The prisoners, I don't think so.
No, I mean, Paul's doing that. Paul's doing that, trying to help or whatever, and all of a sudden he's like, because it's all dark and everything he said. And then he's more like, don't kill yourself. We, help the situation out here. And that's when he's like, oh my gosh, these people.
Yeah. I wonder if it's like, in the ancient world, it was like, if your God is more powerful than my God, kind of set up wherever you went, and like, Paul's coming in and this demon saying like, oh, you're the most high God, is like kind of throwing the map down for like Roman gods or your God. And then with everything going on, then like Paul's coming out like wanting the magistrate to come lock them out after an earthquake. Like for me, if I was like one of those Roman citizens, I'd kind of be wondering if this Most High God really did just throw down the Roman gods.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's probably the dominant note. It's just so crazy. Like, what must that do to say? It just assumes that there's all kinds of other stuff that he would know. People just don't ask that question even if they're pretty freaked out by something. Wow, very interesting. Well, let's move to chapter 17. And there's some drama that keeps driving Paul forward. And then he ends up in Athens with this incident on the Areopagus. But yeah, what stuck out to you in this chapter? Let's continue on this journey.
I think it's interesting that the different places they're in, how the wording is different. So in verse 4, they're in Amphipolis and Apollonia, correct? And it says, some of the Jews were persuaded, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women. And then they move along, there's someone else, there's somewhere else. And in verse 12, so in Berea, it says there are a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. So it's like, were there no Jews there? Or have we, I mean, it's just the population composition of each of these places is interesting to me because the words change.
But the start of 12 says many of them believe. So I assume those were the Jews, the Berean Jews, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, true, yeah.
Yeah, and you contrast what's going on with Berea over Thessalonica, where things just ran off the rails and there was all kinds of trouble. Where Berea, there was more like a steady like audience of listening and examination. So a lot of them end up believing. And it seems like in Berea, like the ideal result happens that Paul would have been looking for in every place, but never happens. Where he goes to a synagogue first, some Jews believe, and then the word expands beyond that, and like non-Jews come to believe.
What stood out to me, I think, is and take this with a grain of salt, not so sure, but it feels like his argument is very different here than things we've been hearing. Like
Where? In which place?
17 to the people of Athens.
Oh, okay, yeah, in the address in the Areopagus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating and artful and all those sorts of things. It just feels very different than like when we've heard him in the past speaking to the Jews and he's bringing up he's reasoning from the prophets and things like that Jesus is the Messiah, and here it's just very different.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they went to Jason's house to go look for him, but never heard that didn't happen at Lydia's house. Almost like there was a complete lack of respect in this area.
Yeah, to your point, Jill, there's he's been up let's see here. At the beginning of 17, chapter 2 or verse 2, he reasons with them from the scriptures. So he's based like because that's the shared world between him and his audience. Proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. So it's all based on that. And then when he's in Athens and he's in the Areopagus, he's not arguing from scripture. It's a very different kind of an approach.
He's talking to Stoics, Greek philosophy.
Yeah, it's all it's people that are interested in Greek in philosophy. Yeah, totally. Did anybody? Okay, if we just go right to that address. Did anybody hear any commonalities with other addresses in Acts at all?
Yeah, was it Stephen or one of the dudes talking about like kind of being accused of speaking against the temple, speaking against the law, and he's like, God doesn't need a temple, or blah blah blah, That was that parallel.
Yeah. Do you remember the language? Temple.
It wasn't blah, blah, blah?
Well, we didn't look at the translation. Yeah. Couple, yeah. Yeah, it's actually it's very strategic. Well, and also what's interesting here is keep in mind that we're reading Luke's account of the events. So we're reading Luke's account of Stephen's speech, Luke's account of Peter's speech, Luke's account of every speech. And so this is Luke's account of Paul's speech. So we're reading a text that where Luke is portraying a common set of themes. And it's with regard to the temple, it's a very specific description of the temple. Did you catch it at all?
Well, the Most High does not live in houses made by human hands.
Made by hands.
Yeah, that's the same words. Yeah.
It's so critical. That term.
Chapter 7, 47.
And
17.
It's a temple made with hands. And so Stephen, like when Stephen, I guess I'd say it this way. By this point, Luke's intended audience would have already been familiar with how Luke is talking about temple made with hands. But the first instance of Stephen mentioning a temple made with hands to that specific audience, that would be the beginning of them wanting to kill him. Because that expression, it's one Greek word. Every time that Greek word is used in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it's always used of idols. Idols are things fashioned with hands. And so like you could say, and I think you're right, Joe, this is very different because he's not explicitly arguing from the scriptures. But this is like what the scriptures would sound like if somebody could give a summary of the whole Old Testament in 10 verses to a non-Christian or non-Jewish audience. It's so saturated with scriptural frames of reference. And so like what he's doing is basically giving a speech very much like Stephen's to a Jewish audience, to a non-Jewish audience, and it's focused on the fact that the creator, which was why I was struck when Joanna's translation, the creator helps him, and it's just so interesting. But the creator does not live in this building made with hands. And then it's also in verse 28 and 29, we are his offspring, therefore since we are God's offspring. And what he's calling on there is the Jewish, is the whole way of thinking around image of God. So God inhabits all of creation as his temple, not a building. All of creation is his temple. And he doesn't have this piece of stone in his one building as his image. We are his image. And so, like, since we are his offspring, which some of your own poets have said, like, the offspring is less than the creator. So if you think you're less than a rock, what are you doing? You already know that you're not. You know that the creator is greater than you, and he's actually this being that doesn't need any less. He doesn't need, and he doesn't dwell in the temple. He inhabits all of creation. He's not something that can be manipulated like a piece of gold or silver or stone.
The creator is greater. The creator created us.
It's greater than the creation.
But then we created the made with human hands.
Yeah.
We created these idols, so you get it upside down.
Right. So like in the Old Testament, that's the stupidity of idolatry. Like think about how stupid this is that you build this thing. And so the prophets are always mocking the fact that like, you know, oh, you have to go home and look after your God. No, God looks after us. You have to kind of go home and take care of your God and all that kind of stuff. So like there's all this, it's so interesting in Genesis 2, you remember where God puts the man in the garden, or he puts the man in the garden, and then he brings all the animals before him to see what he will name them. Well, there's these two words. I don't know if he moves them from one place in the garden to another, but God takes and puts the man in the garden and then parades all the animals. But those are real strategic words. He takes and puts. And then later, much later, in the Old Testament, when Israel is battling against Philistines, and Israel's been so badly defeated that the Philistines take the ark and they parade it around all the towns. Remember that? And they put it in the temple of Dagon, indicating that Dagon has beat the God of Israel. Remember this episode? And then they get up the next morning and they go into the temple, they're like all excited, and they find Dagon he's fallen on his face and his hands are chopped off. And basically because what happened is the divine warrior showed up and defeated Dagon overnight and put him in a place of worship, in a posture of worship, and cut off his hands. And the hand of the Lord was heavy upon him. It was just it's so interesting, the narrative. But one of the things that happens there, they find Dagon like that, all embarrassed. Well, they take and put him back on his pedestal. So like if you have Israelite ears, that's a funny story, because like what a God does is takes and puts the man, but they have to take and you have to care for your God, basically. So it's kind of it's sort of like I said, the stupidity of idolatry. And it's the way that the prophets critique idolatry, and Paul brings the same critique to bear on the Athenians. But of course, they don't know that. But what we're reading is Luke's account of that speech.
But these are academic, educated philosophers thinking about how the world works and what's the nature of man and God. And they would say, it would make sense to them to say, yeah, how is it that we fashion these, old sculptures and call it God, but then we're the ones that made it God. How's that really God? So philosophically, it makes sense as an argument.
Yeah, it's a very logical argument.
Yeah, totally. That's what I think Paul would think that as well. But it's interesting because the response is like, get this Babylon out of here. Because some of them sneered, like it didn't go very well, because he's bringing ideas from his Israelite heritage.
But after, that
which is just like it's a world away from Athens. You know what I mean? And it's also not respected by Athens.
Yeah, but he's breaking their long held views and making them think about it. So the ones that are, conservative or traditional, thinking, hey, this is the way things are, and this is the way things will be. But then he puts the argument forward that turns things upside down, and they're like, no, we can't have this. We want to go back to what we've always believed.
Or he's just saying things foreign to their tradition. They're not into it.
In the text, it feels like they might have been traveling with him till he got to that resurrection part. Because it's like when they heard about the resurrection of the dead. I mean, you got the whole gamut. You got the sneer. You got the we'll be willing to have a conversation about this more later, and then sounds like folks were like,
there were a couple.
But this is Athens, and it's some traveling distance away from Jerusalem. Some might have heard about this resurrected man. Some might not have heard of it, and some said, "Hey, that's impossible." But others would have said, "Yeah, we've heard about it, but no one's really refuted that it happened." So that we might have had a mixed reaction.
Well, I felt it was outside of the logical argument. So he has this logical argument, and then he says, and this all is because of the raising of the dead. And that's when they said, wait a minute, okay. You've got this logical argument following that, but then all of a sudden you said that, which in our experience, and we've never seen anything like that. And so they realm it into the illogical. They think of it as being a logical argument. So that's why they go, yeah, okay, right. Some of them. But it's a very learned group, and they want to learn, they want to understand. So so even after the end of that, there's still some that came up and said, we want to hear more of this. So.
I think that what it fits though in some ways in terms of if you think about the story that Luke has been telling, is that in Jewish lands, the apostles and these missionaries, they're doing good everywhere they go. And even when they run into trouble, it's as a result of them upsetting corrupted social norms. Does that make sense? And when they get hauled before authorities, you know, they get beaten or whatever, the authorities check them out and eventually say they didn't do anything wrong. You know what I'm saying? And then, even in this instance, I think it's important that the result of Paul's speech in the Areopagus is kind of like, some people are into it, some people are not, but it's not dangerous. It's not bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think Luke is trying to tell the story that like there's this new thing unleashed on the world, and it's upsetting norms because it's offending the powerful. It's liberating people from demonic oppression, from poverty and all the rest. But it's not illegal. It's not bad. Every time it gets kind of checked out, it gets sort of vindicated. And even when it gets hauled before like a learned society, some people buy it, some people don't, but it's not regarded as like twisted and perverse and evil. But I think we're going to see that more and more and more. The apostles and people on mission getting hauled before authorities. They're doing terrible things. Well, no, they're not really. You know, I think that's one of the big things that we're supposed to grapple with. All right, we should probably call it to a halt there. Thank you for the vigorous conversation as always. And next time, 18 and 19. Yep, 18 and 19.
Thanks, Tim. More reading? All right. Oh, Carol, go ahead.
This is Luke 16, 19 to 31. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." But Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things, and now he is comforted here and you are in agony. And beside all this, between us and you a great chasm has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." He answered, I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." "No, Father Abraham," he said, "but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." He said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
Thanks. All right. We have someone to do the benediction, or?
I've got it.
All right.
All right. Open our minds to understand the scriptures. Open our eyes to the wonders of your words. Open our ears to hear as one who is learned and gives words to the weary. Open our hearts to pay attention. Open our hands to the poor. Open the doors you'd have our feet walk through. Bless you. Amen.
Amen. Everyone have a great week. Go Birds.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
So they got Tampa. Yeah, yeah. They were lucky last.